Americans avoid the draft during Vietnam.
I feel like I'm a free man now.
From Fort Hood, Texas to St. Catharines, Ontario, Huey crossed the border duty-free.
Let me read to you some letters to the editor that we pulled out of the San Antonio paper. Quote, he should be brought back and shot. Quote, I would recommend the ultimate punishment, death. He deserves it. What do you think when the folks back home are writing that stuff about you?
It makes me sad to know that there's that much hate in the country.
But can't you understand where they're coming from?
Right. I can't understand because before I joined the Army, I would have thought the same way. Anyone who said no to a war, I would have thought them a traitor and a coward. So in that essence, I'm thankful for this experience because it has opened my eyes and it has taught me not to take things on the surface.
What do you mean opened your eyes?
I'd have to say that my image of my country always being the good guy and always fighting for just causes has been shattered.
Huey and other deserters will be represented before the Canadian Immigration and Refugee Board by Toronto lawyer Jeffrey House.
Your clients have to prove that if they return to the United States, they wouldn't just be prosecuted for what they did, they would be persecuted in the United States.
Right.
How do you make that claim?
People should have a right to say, I'm not fighting in that war. That's an illegal war. There's illegal stuff going on the ground. I'm not going. And anyone who says soldiers should go to jail if they don't fight in an illegal war is persecuting them.
It's something House has experience with. In 1969, he graduated from the University of Wisconsin, got drafted, and spent the rest of his life in Canada. House's legal strategy will focus on his contention that President Bush is not complying with international law.
These are volunteers who signed a contract. They are supposed to follow orders.
Well, it's like, and the United States is supposed to comply with treaty obligations like the UN Charter, but they don't. When the president isn't complying with the Geneva Accords or with the UN Charter, are we saying, oh, only the soldier who signed up when he was 17, that guy has to very strictly comply with contract? The president, he doesn't have to. I don't think so. I don't think that's fair.
The first deserter to face the Canadian Immigration and Refugee Board is Jeremy Hinsman of Rapid City, South Dakota. He joined the military in January 2001 and was a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne. He wanted a career in the military, but over time, he decided he couldn't take a life.
So I was walking to the chow hall with my unit, and we were yelling, train to kill, kill we will, over and over again. And I kind of snuck a peek around me and saw all my colleagues getting red in the face and hoarse. And at that point, a light kind of struck in my head, and I just said, you know, I made the wrong career decision.
But Hinsman told us he didn't want to get out of the Army.
I had signed a contract for 4 years, and I was totally willing to fulfill it, just not in a combat arms job.
While at Fort Bragg, Specialist Hinsman said he filled out the forms for conscientious objector status that would let him stay in the Army in a non-combat job. While he waited for a decision, he went to Afghanistan and worked in a kitchen. But later, the Army told him he didn't qualify as a conscientious objector, and he was ordered to fight in Iraq. Hinsman decided to take his family to Canada, where he's been living off his savings earned in the military.
It's not your decision. You're in the Army now. It is not Specialist Jeremy Hinsman's decision on whether to go or not, or whether it's right or not. You're supposed to follow orders. It's what you signed up to do.
And I was also told in basic training, if I'm given an illegal or immoral order, it is my duty to disobey it. And I feel that invading and occupying Iraq is an illegal and immoral thing to do.
But you can't have an army of free thinkers. You wouldn't have an army.
No, you wouldn't, but I think there are times when militaries or countries act in a collectively wrong way. I mean, the obvious example was during World War II. Sure, Saddam Hussein was a really bad guy. I mean, he ranks up there with the bad ones. But was he a threat to the U.S.?
I've been in the mass graves outside Hilla in Iraq.
It's horrible.
You bet.
It's horrible.
People with their arms tied behind their back, shot in the back of the head,
no,
hundreds of them.
It's awful. And like, well, you know, there was this place.
Is that worth fighting for?
Whether a country lives under freedom or tyranny or whatever else, that's the collective responsibility of the people of that country.
Hensman and the other American deserters have become celebrities of sorts in the Canadian anti-war movement. As we said, the Pentagon tells us there are about 5,500 deserters since the war in Iraq began. Only a few are in Canada, but Jeffrey House, the Canadian lawyer, is getting more calls from nervous soldiers all the time.
How many others have contacted you?
Well, I think something like 60. Some of them say, I'm AWOL, I'm now in Mexico, can you help me? I want to come to Canada. Others say, what are my options? I'm AWOL, I don't want to go to Iraq, what can I do?
We've talked a lot in this interview about doing honorable things and doing the right thing. Isn't the right and honorable thing to go back to the United States, turn yourself into the Army, and say, prosecute me, put me in jail?
Why would that be honorable?
Because you had signed a contract. You had sworn an oath.
To defend the Constitution of the United States, not take part in offensive preemptive wars. I don't think you should have to be punished for doing the right thing. What benefit is there in being a martyr? And I don't see any.
Hensman began his hearing before the Canadian Immigration and Refugee Board last Monday, but there's no telling when he'll find out whether he'll be allowed to stay in Canada or be sent back to the U.S. to face the consequences. The maximum penalty for deserting in wartime is death, but it's more typical for a soldier to draw a sentence of 5 years or less.
In a moment, they're not just preaching to the choir anymore. Christian rock rocks the music world.